Volodymyr Z, a Ukrainian suspected by Germany of involvement in the bombing of the Nord Stream gas pipeline, has been arrested in Poland. The man was wanted on the basis of a European arrest warrant issued by a German court. Volodymyr Z was caught by the police in Pruszków and taken to the district prosecutor's office in Warsaw. We got up at 7 a.m. The children were getting ready for school. Then the police came and took my husband away. We weren't ready for this because you can't prepare yourself for the shock of seeing your husband being led away in handcuffs. The next steps to be taken by the Polish prosecutor's office are to submit a request to the district court in Warsaw for a 7-day detention order. The purpose of this would be to obtain the relevant documentation from the German side. This will form the basis for further proceedings, in this case the preparation and possible support of a request for the extradition of this man in accordance with the European arrest warrant. The Polish court that will make this decision on extradition must first review the documentation provided by the EU member state, which will send this documentation in Polish. And it will be the court's responsibility to make a decision on possible extradition within approximately 100 days. The suspect has not admitted guilt. Tymoteusz Paprocki, the lawyer of the suspect, said there are no grounds for extraditing Volodymyr Z to the German justice system. I really hope that Poland will help us and that my husband will not be sent to Germany. My client has not committed any crime against Germany. In my opinion, no Ukrainian citizen can be accused in Europe of destroying Russian property in this situation when his country is at war. The prosecutor also said that the man is 46-year-old, lives in the Pruszków district, and runs a business. He is also a scuba diver. The Ukrainian embassy also asked the district prosecutor's office in Warsaw for help, with a request to arrange a meeting with this man and to provide consular assistance. Germany has already issued a European arrest warrant a year earlier, but the arrest did not take place. Immediately before the execution of that European arrest warrant, the man left the border of the Republic of Poland and went to Ukraine. This morning, in connection with the execution of various searches in different locations in the Pruszków district, including this one and others, it was verified whether or not he was staying at his last place of residence. It turned out he was staying there. My client has been in Poland for a long time because he is a person who has not committed any crime in the European Union. My client is not afraid of facing justice and is not afraid to show the German side, taking into account the European arrest warrant, how wrong they are. The explosion that damaged the Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline occurred in September 2022, 6 months after Russia's invasion of Ukraine. From the outset, apart from Russia, the biggest beneficiaries of this construction were to be Germany, which ignored the voices of opposition from Eastern European countries threatened by Russian imperialism, as well as the United States. Since 2011, Germany has been using Russian gas transmitted via Nord Stream 1. The audacity with which Germany is trying to push its services to Gazprom on Europe and the world is shocking. Let us remember that even this message that is being conveyed is untrue. It was the Russians who cut off gas supplies to Germany. Only Russia turned off the tap. Tomorrow, the district court in Warsaw will likely decide to remand Volodymyr Z in custody for 7 days. The defense, in turn, will request that their client be released on bail.
One of the most ambitious infrastructure projects in Europe. This is how the German daily Berliner Zeitung describes Poland's Central Communication, or CPK, port project. The idea was that every Pole would live within a 30-minute commute to a railway station, from which they would have at least several high-quality daily connections a day. It was, because shortly after coming to power in Poland, Donald Tusk wanted to throw the project into the trash. The original idea was to create a new international hub in the form of an airport, supplemented by a high-speed rail network. The largest cities in Poland were to be connected by almost 2,000 kilometers of new railway tracks. Tusk intends to implement it in a greatly reduced form. The ambitious plans have been scaled back to a modest project. Its advantage was supposed to be that it would be possible to quickly commute to it from many places throughout Poland. We also know very well that this CPK airport is competition for the airport in Berlin, and that is precisely why our Western neighbours are so afraid of this project. They would certainly be afraid if the CPK were implemented in its original vision. Now it seems that Germany is satisfied with the downsizing of the project. Baranov will not be a serious competitor because passengers from Berlin are unlikely to decide to travel 500 kilometers to Warsaw to start their flight from there. The analysis by the Berliner Zeitung noted that the coverage of both airports partially overlaps, and only the full implementation of the planned rail network would make Warsaw a real competitor to Berlin. What is more, one of the planned high-speed rail lines was to run from CPK to Frankfurt am Oder. but it was removed from the project by Donald Tusk.
Idzie o miliony, to znaczy
We are talking about millions, not just passengers, but also cargo and therefore huge revenues for the state budget. Secondly, it is a huge logistics hub, even in the context of the reconstruction of Ukraine, in the context of the military and security. A giant air hub means security and prosperity for us. Limiting the CPK program to the small Y-shaped project means a lack of ambition, masked by the idea of increasing speed to over 300 kilometers an hour. The train speed is Donald Tusk's greatest ambition. We will ambitiously tackle the project, and I'm not talking about the distant future, but today, tomorrow, the day after tomorrow, of high-speed rail, the fastest in Europe, over 300 kilometers an hour. Such a decision would spell the end for these Polish rolling stock manufacturers. Polish manufacturers have been saying for years that they have no chance of competing in tenders for rolling stock above 300 kilometers an hour. Therefore, the question arises, who will benefit from this? This means that billions of zloty will actually go abroad in the form of dividends and, more importantly, tickets for these trains will simply be more expensive. This was even pointed out openly by Piotr Rachwalski, a member of the CPK management board, who was clearly excited about the range of foreign companies that could take part in the tender, led by Germany's Siemens. For years, there have been almost no tenders in Europe for new high-speed trains, and manufacturers have invested heavily in their products. They would like to somehow recoup these enormous expenditures and years of design and testing. So, if the sieve is not too dense, we can expect considerable interest. Siemens will certainly not let it go this time. Oh, I feel that something is going to happen. We have a German project and a Polish project. We are junior partners in the German project. We will be buying locomotives and building infrastructure with the participation of foreign companies. No wonder German MEPs are openly lobbying for the scaled-down version of the CPK project. Each additional stop would lengthen the journey and increase its duration. The city of Kalisz has just over 100,000 inhabitants and is therefore not included as a stop. The omission of Kalisz from the project not only excludes the city's residents from the possibility of using the high-speed railway, it also generates additional costs. Tusk's coalition and its allies are spending 2 billion zloty to ensure that the CPK project bypasses Kalisz. Berliner Zeitung also reminds us that Deutsche Bahn plans to compete with Poland's PKP on the Berlin-Warsaw route. Modern Siemens trains could also serve connections from Warsaw to Łódź, Poznan and Wrocław. I am not afraid of competition. Our national carrier is prepared for this. We are simply better. Foreign carriers will be allowed on Polish tracks now, even though the European Union has ruled that opening up to competition is not mandatory until 2030. I think it will be very good to take advantage of the time without external competition, and only then with very strong foundations. Not just think about defending the domestic market, but also expanding into other regions. Tusk's plan for the CPK have not yet found support in the Polish parliament. Last Friday, MPs decided to continue with the presidential project to implement the CPK in its original version. I do not accept the MP's vote, and not because it is a presidential bill. I will be interested in explanations or positions, but I will not hide the fact that, from my point of view, this is a bad sign on the part of Marshal Szymon Hołownia and his party, Polska 2050. However, it cannot be ruled out that Germany will continue to push for the bill to be scaled back. The dispute is about whether Poland today can sovereignly afford to build something groundbreaking and great against Germany without Germany's consent. They can see perfectly well what effective competition from seaports looks like, because it is precisely Polish seaports that, after their expansion, have become huge competitors for German ports, and they fear the same thing when it comes to air traffic. This is one of the reasons why the Germans lobbied for the creation of the Lower Odra Valley National Park. Its creation has already been voted on in the parliament and means a halt to inland shipping and a restriction on the development of Polish ports. A significant escalation. This is how the Kremlin describes Ukraine's potential purchase of long-range missiles. The Russians are becoming increasingly nervous about the word Tomahawk, the type of cruise missile that Kiev has asked Washington to sell it. At the same time, Putin has announced an autumn mobilization, the largest in a decade. over 130,000 soldiers will be drafted. According to analysts, this proves that the Russian war machine has no intention of slowing down and is preparing for another year of war. Operation Desert Storm, January the 17th, 1991, the operational debut for Tomahawk cruise missiles. Within 72 hours, over 200 missiles were launched from American submarines and destroyers operating in the Persian Gulf. Iraqi logistics points, radar bases, command centers and airports ceased to exist. 90% of the missiles fired hit their targets, which was crucial to the success of the entire campaign, and preparations for a ground offensive, whose victory was a foregone conclusion. The Tomahawk became one of the key elements in launching every American war campaign. It was later used in the Balkans in strikes against Serbia, in the campaign in Afghanistan, and in the Second War in Iraq. Tomahawks fell on targets in Libya during the Arab Spring and in Syria during an operation against Islamic State. The last attack in mid-June this year was aimed at Iran's nuclear facilities. The Russians will be forced to deploy their air defense forces and air force to secure a fairly large area of the country. A weapon that will be important in terms of prestige, weapons that could strike important economic and strategic targets, such as refineries or industrial plants producing key components for Russian weapons systems. Analysts are in broad agreement on this issue. Ukraine possessing Tomahawks would change the rules of the game in this war. Suffice it to say that the Russians have already withdrawn their air bases and logistical facilities beyond the range of the HIMARS rocket launchers, whose missiles strike targets at a distance of up to 80 kilometers. The Tomahawk has a range of up to 2,500 kilometers.
And I think President Trump has made clear that he's frustrated with Putin. And, perhaps this indication that they're willing to provide Tomahawk missiles, shows that the frustration has reached a boiling point and they're ready to, balance out, the U.S. approach to the conflict and provide Ukraine with these weapons.
It seems that the uproar over the Tomahawks has been heard in the Kremlin, because Russia is already issuing its first rather hysterical-sounding statements about escalation and crossing the red line. Given that the number of lines crossed by Putin today resembles a pedestrian crossing, no one in the West seems to care.
That issue of Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine was brought up by President Zelensky to President Trump at the UN General Assembly last week in New York City. There has been no comment either, yes, it's going to happen, or no, it's going to happen. The acknowledgement from, again, in the public reports is they were asked for. That is obviously something that has been picked up by the world press, obviously picked up by the Russians as well, simply because of the capability and the capacity of the weapon system.
Putin's mobilization decree is of much greater importance to the planners at the Pentagon and NATO headquarters. It is record-breaking in terms of the number of conscripts. The Russian army is to be reinforced with under 135,000 conscripts in 2 months. Russia adopted a different strategy. The war with Ukraine is a total war, and Russia is also waging a hybrid war with NATO. Meanwhile, the losses in Ukraine are not to be felt by the armed forces of the Russian Federation, which means that, alongside the fighting in Ukraine, military potential is being built up in Russia, as if this war did not exist. The coming weeks from October to December will likely be spent in a war of position. Autumn rains and the onset of winter, as previous years have shown, means stagnation in large-scale maneuvers. A possible offensive could therefore be expected either at the turn of the year or not until spring. Ukraine can use this time to strengthen its forces with new weapons deliveries, including long-range missiles, and perhaps, as the Americans themselves have indicated, launch its own counter-offensive.
The Warsaw Praga prosecutor's office refused to launch an investigation into the flags of the organization of Ukrainian nationalists and the Ukrainian insurgent army that appeared at a concert by Belarusian rapper Max Korsh at the National Stadium in Warsaw, Poland. According to investigators, there was no evidence that the participants of the event intended to promote fascist or Nazi ideology. The evidence did not reveal that the people who had the flag were acting with the intention of promoting totalitarian ideology, said prosecutor Karolina Staros. A total of 8 reports on this matter were submitted to the Warsaw Praga Południe District Prosecutor's Office. referring to symbols associated with Stepan Bandera. He is an ambiguous figure in history. Polish nationalists see Stepan Bandera solely as the author of the Volhynia crimes, working hand in hand with Hitler, disregarding reliable conclusions based on facts and historical sources, while Ukrainian nationalists recognize him primarily as a fighter for Ukrainian independence and a patron of the struggle against the Soviets. In the event that took place on August 9, 2025, there was no element of appealing to the audience for anything. Consequently, there is no element of propaganda in the behavior of these people, which is in fact prohibited behavior. Bandera is an ambiguous figure. The person who wrote this should be immediately dismissed from the prosecutor's office. The promotion of Banderism, Bandera, should be equated in Polish law with the promotion of Hitlerism, the promotion of Hitler, Nazism. This cannot be allowed. During a concert by a Belarusian rapper, a group of Ukrainians began displaying flags of the Organization of Ukrainian Nationalists and the Ukrainian Insurgent Army. The police detained 109 people for numerous offenses and crimes. Polish authorities indicated that 14 foreigners were deported from Poland, and 32 Ukrainians and 1 Belarusian were deemed undesirable on Polish territory. They have been denied entry and residence in the Schengen area for reasons of public safety and order.